The first whispers of the assault came not with thunder, but with an unnatural hush, a momentary lull in the ceaseless hum of Moscow's nocturnal symphony, broken only by the distant thrum of engines slicing through the crisp October air. It was just past 11 p.m. on October 10, 2025, when the Ukrainian drones began their inexorable descent upon the Russian capital, a swarm of silent avengers dispatched from the shadowed frontiers of a war that had long since blurred the lines between battlefields and backyards. These were no haphazard incursions. They were precision instruments of retribution, low-flying phantoms cloaked in stealth composites and guided by algorithms refined in the forges of Ukrainian resilience. Over 250 of them pierced the veil of night, evading the Kremlin's vaunted radar nets until the very last moment, when the sky erupted in a frenzy of defensive fire. Explosions bloomed like malevolent flowers across the horizon, their orange petals unfurling over the Moskva River, casting erratic shadows on the onion domes of the Kremlin that flickered like the final gasps of a dying star. Moscow, the indomitable fortress of czars and commissars, awoke to chaos, its streets transformed into veins of panic as sirens clawed at the eardrums of 2 million souls. The initial barrage targeted the industrial sinews that fed Russia's war engine, striking with the cold calculus of necessity rather than blind rage. A fuel depot on the southeastern outskirts, nestled amid the labyrinthine sprawl of Domodedovo's cargo yards, took the brunt of the opening salvo. Drones, dubbed Black Widows, in Kyiv's clandestine briefings, slammed into storage tanks with payloads of thermobaric fury, igniting reservoirs of aviation kerosene that had been earmarked for the front lines in Donetsk. The resultant fireball climbed hundreds of meters, a roiling column of flame that painted the underbelly of low clouds in hues of infernal red, visible from as far as the gilded spires of the Christ the Savior Cathedral. Secondary detonations chained through the facility like dominoes toppled by divine wrath, hurling shrapnel and debris in a lethal rain that pelted nearby warehouses and scorched the tarmac of secondary runways. Eyewitnesses, their accounts captured in breathless telegram dispatches, described the heat as a living thing, a palpable wave that singed hair and blistered skin even a kilometer away. Cars on the Kashira highway veered wildly, their drivers blinded by the glare, while emergency responders raced against the blaze's insatiable hunger, their trucks silhouetted against the pyre like insects drawn to a lantern. As the night deepened, the assault widened its embrace, ensnaring the capital's beating heart in a web of fire and fear. Anti-aircraft batteries along the Garden Ring unleashed a storm of tracers, azure streaks lancing upward to greet the intruders, but the drones adapted with eerie intelligence, dipping low over the Yaouza River to hug the contours of Soviet-era high-rises. One struck a munitions assembly plant in the Philly district, a squat complex of reinforced concrete that had churned out cluster warheads for the invasion's early days. The explosion ripped through conveyor lines, vaporizing stockpiles of explosives in a concussion that shattered windows across 3 blocks, from the upscale cafes of Kutuzovsky Prospect to the modest kiosks hawking pierogi to night shift workers. Flames leapt from the breach, devouring pallets of rocket propellant and sending plumes of toxic smoke skyward, laced with the acrid bite of burning polymers. Residents in adjacent apartment towers, jolted from slumber, stumbled into hallways reeking of cordite, their children clutched tight as the building groaned under aftershocks. In the adjoining, Lotoshino neighborhood, a secondary fire leapt to a transformer station, plunging swaths of the district into Stygian black, where only the erratic glow of emergency flares marked the exodus of families bundling into the chill with whatever they could carry. The human mosaic of that night's terror unfolded in fragments, pieced together from the raw immediacy of social media and the hurried reports of those on the ground. A dashcam video, uploaded to X at 12:47 a.m. by a commuter trapped on the Third Ring Road, captured the surreal poetry of evasion, headlights weaving through a gauntlet of fallen drone fragments, their metallic husks clattering like hail on windshields, while in the rearview, a missile intercept painted the sky in staccato bursts. The driver's voice, steady at first but cracking with exhaustion, narrated the scene. "They're everywhere, like angry hornets," before trailing into silence as another boom rattled the frame. Farther afield, in the Kolomna suburb where the Moskva's tributaries wind lazily through birch groves, a grandmother and her young grandson became unwitting martyrs to the fray. Debris from a downed drone, a jagged wing fragment trailing sparks, ignited their wooden dacha, the flames devouring the structure before firefighters could breach the inferno. Their loss, confirmed by Regional Governor Andrei Vorobyov in a terse telegram post at 2:15 a.m., rippled through the community like a aftershock, neighbors gathering in the pre-dawn fog to lay flowers at the smoldering site, their whispers a litany of grief and defiance. F11B0. By 3 a.m., the assault's crescendo had ebbed, leaving Moscow to tally its wounds under a sky smeared with soot. Mayor Sergei Sobyanin, emerging from the fortified command center beneath City Hall, addressed the city via live broadcast, his features gaunt in the studio lights. Our air defenses neutralized 251 enemy drones en route to the capital, he announced, his tone a calibrated blend of resolve and restraint, with impacts confined to peripheral zones. Power restoration is underway, and no further threats are imminent. Yet the numbers told a grimmer tale. Fires raged unchecked in at least 7 locations, from the petrochemical silos of Kapotnia, where a drone strike had breached a reactor, spewing a miasma of benzene that forced a 5-kilometer evacuation, to the rail yards of Podils, where derailed freight cars spilled diesel in rivulets that fed the blaze like offerings to some ancient fire god. Satellite feeds from European Space Agency assets, declassified hours later, revealed thermal signatures rivaling those of a mid-sized wildfire, with hotspots clustered around energy infrastructure that supplied a third of the capital's heating grid. 90 DC3F. The footage that would define the night began circulating almost immediately, a torrent of unpolished verite flooding X and Telegram channels, outpacing the lumbering machinery of state censorship. One clip, timestamped 032 from a high-rise balcony in Lubirtsi, showed the swarm's approach in chilling clarity, 24 specks materializing from the southwest, their silhouettes briefly etched against the moon before vanishing into the defensive maelstrom. The video's author, a software engineer named Elena posting under the handle at Moskvichka87, narrated in hushed urgency, "God, they're so close," as the first intercept lit the frame, a drone erupting in a silent nova that showered embers over the sleeping city below. Another sequence, sourced from a body cam worn by a patrolling FSB operative leaked via dissident networks, depicted the frantic choreography of response, teams scrambling across rain-slicked rooftops to reposition Manpad's launchers, their breaths fogging in the autumn bite as fragments whistled past like vengeful spirits. These visuals, raw and unfiltered, amassed millions of views within hours, trending under #KyievFireReply and #MoscowUnderFire, a digital requiem that humanized the statistics. 9 injured in the capital alone, per preliminary tallies, with dozens more treated for smoke inhalation and shrapnel wounds. 07C659. From Kyiv, the operation's architects framed the strikes not as terror, but as calibrated equity. President Volodymyr Zelensky, convening an emergency session in the bowels of the presidential office, released a statement at 4 a.m. local time. Every drone that breaches Moscow's skies carries the echo of Bucha's graves, of Mariupol's ruins. This is not escalation, it is equilibrium. Intelligence sources, speaking anonymously to Reuters, detailed the prelude. Reconnaissance flights over the prior fortnight had mapped vulnerabilities in Russia's S-400 envelope, exploiting gaps widened by maintenance backlogs and crew fatigue. The drones themselves, hybrids of captured Iranian designs and indigenous upgrades, boasted ranges exceeding 1,000 kilometers, propelled by fuel-efficient turbofans and navigated via onboard AI that rerouted in real time around jamming fields. Targets were surgical. The Domodedovo depot, which funneled 20% of jet fuel to Black Sea Fleet operations, the Philly plant, producer of Iskander missile components, and ancillary nodes like a drone assembly hangar in Tula, whose destruction Kyiv claimed would hamstring Moscow's own UAV production by weeks. Western allies, though publicly circumspect, had greenlit the op via tacit nods, enhanced SIGINT feeds from NATO partners, perhaps even prototype jammers tested in Polish proving grounds, transforming Ukraine's underdog ingenuity into a force multiplier that humbled a superpower's hubris. 4 Bay 3E. Dawn broke over the capital like a reluctant confessor, its pale light exposing the scars etched into the urban tapestry. Smoke wraiths lingered over the Rublevka elite enclave, where oligarchs' compounds, fortified with panic rooms and private helipads, had weathered the night unscathed, though power flickers had interrupted satellite feeds to overseas accounts. In contrast, the working-class precincts of Biryulyovo and Tsaritsino bore the brunt, their Soviet blocks pocked with boarded windows and streets cordoned by militia tape. Volunteers, emerging from metro bunkers where they'd sheltered amid the all-clear, formed human chains to ferry bottled water and blankets to the displaced, their faces streaked with ash but alight with a quiet solidarity born of shared ordeal. Hospitals swelled with the afflicted, burned victims from the depot blaze, their skin sloughing like wax under fluorescent glare, concussed elders felled by falling glass, and psych cases, the shell-shocked whose nightmares now replayed in waking hours. The economic aftershocks reverberated swiftly, the MOEX index gap down 4.2% at open, energy stocks hemorrhaging value as global markets priced in supply disruptions, while Brent crude ticked upward on whispers of cascading refinery halts from Tumen to Perm. 27 EF88. Social currents churned in the wake, a maelstrom of narratives clashing on X's fractured forums. Russian state media, RT and Sputnik chief among them, spun a tale of heroic interceptions. 251 fascist birds felled before harm's threshold, bolstering the regime's facade of impregnability. Yet cracks showed in the edifice. User-generated content, from a firefighter's selfie amid the Philly wreckage to a commuter's rant about blacked-out trams, painted a portrait of vulnerability that no spin could fully obscure. Abroad, the diaspora amplified the chorus, Ukrainian expats in Toronto and Berlin sharing footage with captions evoking the Holodomor, that man-made famine whose ghosts Kyiv invoked to contextualize the strikes. 1A51AF NATO's response was a diplomatic minuet. Condemnations of Russian provocations in Ukrainian airspace, coupled with veiled approbation for Kyiv's defensive measures, as Brussels convened urgent consultations. In Washington, the White House Situation Room hummed with analysts poring over classified intercepts, weighing the strike's tactical yield against escalation risks, perhaps a hypersonic riposte, or worse, the Kremlin's nuclear saber rattling dusted off for domestic applause. As midday waned, the cleanup commenced under a sun veiled by haze, crews in hazmat gear sifting through the Kapotnia rubble for unexploded ordnance, their movements methodical against the backdrop of idling fire engines. In quieter corners, like the leaf-strewn paths of Gorky Park, evacuated at height of the barrage, joggers and dog walkers reconvened, trading theories over thermoses of tea. Had Western chips powered those drones? Was this the prelude to a broader autumn offensive? The psychological residue clung like the smoke. Insomnia in high rises, where families double-checked blackout curtains, a spike in hotline calls to crisis lines, voices trembling with the novelty of fear in a city long insulated by geography. Schools extended closures into a second day, playgrounds repurposed as aid depots, while the metro's subterranean hum resumed, ferrying a populace schooled in stoicism yet frayed at the edges. Yet amid the desolation, glimmers of adaptation emerged, the capital's indomitable pulse reasserting itself. Street vendors hawked hot kvass from carts jury-rigged with propane lanterns, their banter a defiant bulwark against despair. Artists in the Arbat sketched hasty murals of phoenixes rising from flames, chalked onto bomb shelter walls. And in boardrooms overlooking the still smoldering Moskva, executives pivoted, rerouting supply chains through Kazakhstan, commissioning emergency generators from Chinese suppliers, turning crisis into calculus. The strikes, for all their visceral punch, exposed fractures in the Kremlin's armor. Air defense crews, stretched thin by simultaneous threats in Belgorod and Crimea, where parallel barrages downed another 122 drones, logistics chains vulnerable to asymmetric jabs that bled resources without conquering territory. 3 Phase 0 CF. By evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon in a blaze of unseasonal crimson, Moscow exhaled, a collective sigh laced with vigilance. The fires were tamed to embers, patrolled by drones of a friendlier sort, their infrared eyes scanning for rainition. Zelensky's evening address from Kyiv promised no quarter. Our reach grows with our resolve, let this be the Kremlin's wake-up. Putin, sequestered in his Valdai redoubt, issued no direct riposte, but FSB chatter hinted at reprisals in the offing, perhaps a cyber salvo crippling Ukraine's grid, or Shahed swarms redoubled against Odessa. The world, from UN podiums to Davos salons, parsed the pivot. Ukraine's drone doctrine, once dismissed as guerrilla theater, now a strategic scalpel carving at empire's flanks. In the end, the night's inferno left not just scars on concrete, but etchings on the psyche, a reminder that in this war of shadows, no citadel is sacrosanct. Moscow slumbered uneasily, its dreams haunted by the drone's whisper, while across the border, engineers in Lviv iterated on the next wave, their monitors aglow with trajectories unbound. The explosions had rocked the capital, yes, but in their echo lingered a deeper tremor, the sound of momentum shifting, inexorably, toward the dawn of accountability.